We get all serious.
We're live.
We're live.
Well, hey, good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the new and improved One Decent Pastor podcast.
Once we got like 11 viewers, we were like, we're getting real mics.
Yeah.
So
So hopefully it sounds infinitely better.
Yeah,
today.
let us know if it sounds any different. Hopefully it's a little clearer and louder.
let us know if David's way too loud.
We were told we were unlistenable by one person.
Yeah.
You put on your radio voice right now?
I am. I have a microphone in
We're
front of me.
listenable today.
We were just talking about something fairly important, and I kind of want to get back to it, and it's etiquette of fingernail clipping.
Oh, is that what we're going
wow.
back to?
David was saying he goes outside when he clips his nails, and this is a revolutionary idea to me because
I have never even considered
the
that.
lighting is better, and then wherever they land doesn't really matter.
Correct.
Because some people aren't really careful with where the clippings land.
Yeah.
No, and that's an outside deal.
I think I might be from now on.
Yeah.
You might have just converted me to that.
Good.
I remember one time I had to go to a friend's, he was preaching a sermon, and I had to grade or critique him. It was in Bible college. And so I had to go to his home church, and he was preaching, and the lady behind me decided that was the opportune time to clip her nails right in the middle of his sermon. I think she was bored.
Wow.
She was bored, and she's like, what can I do to pass the time? And so she started just clipping nails, and they were flying throughout the sanctuary, just hitting people in the head. Just, when you clip a nail, they just go rogue.
I thought
wow.
we had that happen here.
That's
Now,
not good.
This was my friend John.
I know we
in,
had
Lake Chelan.
whiskers getting clipped, like a beard being clipped, but I thought we had fingernails being clipped.
Yeah, it was
Too at one point.
a weird day in church.
Huh. That's bizarre.
But
That
I
you
did
would
not-
do that in a public place like that.
I did not add that to my critique of his sermon. Like one lady was so bored that she started clipping her nails. Anyway,
At least he wasn't clipping his nails.
yeah,
He was preaching.
that would have been worse. Yeah,
Or like chewing gum and rubbing his belly.
yeah.
I just realized we didn't post the links to Facebook, so I'm posting the
Oh.
links right now. And
So no one can even watch right now.
well, we got one viewer. I don't know who it is, but
I don't know how many
but
people
this tells me
actually
that we have
use-
one viewer right now. So
I'm not sure how many people really use those because if you've subscribed, anyway,
People don't use
Yeah.
the links.
it would
that
be
what you're
it
saying?
would be
Yeah, you
better
can
to just subscribe.
just subscribe to YouTube and then you can go there anytime and watch it. You don't have to.
Okay.
Well,
go
when
via
you
Facebook.
subscribe, you get an email that says the door has gone live.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just better to do it that way. So
There you go.
all right, links are posted.
All right.
So we're doing something new tomorrow.
Yeah,
Let's go back there.
we're gonna golf.
Heck yeah, we're
Yeah,
going to golf.
all of us.
The pastoral element is going golfing. Mr. Todd McKillop is
Treating us.
taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
It's a club. He plays at the course, and he's bringing us. And
Yeah, he's not embarrassed by
Dude,
us.
it's going to be
evidently.
so bad. Like whoever's following us, like I feel bad for them.
we
already.
should just have a landscaper riding our cart with us. I would think. Yeah.
I'm just going to be pulling over constantly, being like, "You may go. You
Yeah.
may go."
Well, maybe it won't be too terribly busy on a Friday morning. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, pray for the other golfers and the critters on the course because it could be a rough
Yeah,
day.
and pray for Todd.
Well, and I
Yeah.
just found out I have to bring my own clubs, which is ridiculous,
Well,
and I don't have any, so I'm going to borrow some of Chad's.
all right.
Yeah, yeah. I have two sets that might surprise people
Yeah.
to know.
Chad's a
I don't
veteran.
know. Yeah, I don't know
Golfer.
about a veteron, but I've
Just
done it
call
before.
you Arnold Palmer.
Chichi Rodriguez.
There we go.
Chi-Chi.
Remember that guy?
Nope.
Growing up, man.
Yeah.
Chichi.
I mean,
made me laugh
the
every
name,
time.
but apparently he was a golfer.
Yeah, golfer.
Never knew where I knew the name.
In our house, Chichi was synonymous with going pee-pee. So if you had to go Chichi or Chicha, it was that
Oh,
was
wow.
so when Chichi Rodriguez showed up on television, I giggled every time.
I'm not going to tell you what GGs were.
Yeah, it was
for
the
us.
same thing. It was way different than that.
It's a Basque thing, I think.
A Basque thing.
Caca and Chichi. Yeah. Anyway,
Wow.
maybe we should.
You just said caca on the
Caca.
podcast. Wow.
That's
That's it.
yeah.
Start over.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking
Wow.
about some stuff.
So it's a heavy day.
Yeah.
This is a heavy day with a heavy crew. So we're going to talk about, we might ruffle some feathers. I don't know. We're
Most
going to talk
likely.
about something that's very prominent in the church today. And in fact, it's so prominent that we've actually lost people at both locations over this thing.
Yeah.
But it really needs to be talked about because it's a
Yep.
problem, and it seems to be a kind of a growing problem. And the more that our country divides, the more that we're seeing more of this in the church, and it has no business being in the
That's
church.
a good setup right there.
Okay,
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
perfect.
That is-
So
that-
that's
Nicely done.
we can transition now.
Yeah.
So American Gospel, right? We had that film that we like that we always recommend. American Gospel brings out kind of two different variations of Christianity or gospel that's prominent in our country. One is prosperity, one is word faith. I think there's a third category of a very false type of Christianity in our nation, which we would call American nationalism. That's pretty much what it is. So it's kind of this American, well, actually, what's nationalism? Not Christian nationalism, but just nationalism. Give us a definition.
Would it be different than patriotism?
I would.
Are you going to go there?
I kind of thought of it as the same thing. So like, but then there's a healthy kind of patriotism,
Right.
and an unhealthy kind of patriotism.
And I guess in
So
my
it's
mind, that's kind of where I go. Like patriotism is good.
Yeah.
Nationalism is maybe an extreme patriotism.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's an official definition out there somewhere, but just in my mind, that's how I've kind of
It's an aggressive,
delineated.
it's an aggressive form of patriotism.
Yeah.
I think when you just think of love of country and that type of thing, we all probably grew up in a pretty patriotic America.
Yeah.
I remember very much, the idea of pledging allegiance to the flag.
Yeah,
sure.
You go to a game, everybody took their hats off, put your hand over your heart, and you sang the national anthem. If you were at a parade and veterans came through, you clapped. It was just, that was kind of a normal.
there was a pride,
Flags-
kind of a
flags were
universal,
flying.
a corporate pride.
Yeah, love of country.
A buy-in.
Yep.
No matter who you voted for or were registered as.
Yeah.
There was a buy-in to.
But nationalism, I saw Michael Horton gave a definition I thought was pretty helpful. He said, patriotism is when America is special to you. Nationalism is when America is special to God.
Okay.
And I thought that was pretty helpful because
That
I
is
think
helpful.
that's kind of the difference, is that this idea that America is God's chosen nation. It was founded. The narrative goes like this: we've almost become like a new Israel type of thing. The country was founded by solid Christian men with solid Christian principles, and basically the idea is that the government's role was to make sure that this remained a Christian nation, and because we varied from that, we need to get back to that place of the way it used to be. And of course, there's lots of problems with that narrative.
Yes.
I don't think it's accurate necessarily. I mean, some of it's a little accurate, but not completely. And so
that is where I was going to go next, is what is Christian nationalism, which is basically, in a nutshell, you kind of just introduced us to it. So it's the idea that from our beginnings, our origins, that we were Christian. Basically, it's the presupposition, the understanding that we were built as a Christian nation. And so if you buy that narrative and you hold that view, then there is going to be a nationalism that finds itself into the church and out of the church.
Well, and it'll even go to the point of saying that if you don't fit into that category of somebody who's a Christian, it carries these values and ideal, this ideology and so forth,
Yeah.
that you're actually the enemy,
Yeah.
and not welcome here, and maybe even a traitor.
Yeah.
It gets to that point of kind of almost an aggressive,
Yeah.
hostile situation.
So let's step back for a second. Let's clear this up real quick, since we're all experts in American history.
Sure.
We're a Christian nation. Was it founded by a group of Christians?
I would say some of them were.
Some of them.
There's when you go back and read some of the guys, you'll see some of them had just kind of an idea of a benevolent God that oversaw America and blessed us when we followed the principles that were laid out in the Bible. Deists, I would say, kind of that kind of an idea.
Or even theists.
Theists as well. Yep. And a deist is somebody who just basically
Yes.
views God as an impersonal God who kind of just winds the clock and lets it run.
Right.
As long as we do good things, we'll get good things back in the country and
Like
so forth.
Mr. Jefferson.
Well, Thomas Jefferson, I think George Washington. You can make a case for a lot of these guys.
Yes.
Some of the guys were actually even like Ben Franklin was probably an atheist.
I agree. But he was definitely a humanist.
Yeah, a humanist is that's a better term actually.
Yeah, that's
Thank
a
you.
good word.
But then there were other guys that Patrick Henry. You read some of these guys and you would see that they actually seem to promote Jesus Christ and His work as the answer to man's problem.
So this is the difference,
Yeah.
is that it was a collective of people, right,
Yeah.
that founded our nation. And a percentage of those people were Christian, just as a percentage of them were deists, just as a percentage of them were humanists. They weren't a collective of Christians.
Right. It was a mixed bag.
There were some Christians present. So even though you can see, like George Washington in a lot of his writings will use the word God, a lot of them would use the word God. There was some idea of a theistic, belief. Whoa, wonder what that's going to sound like. You don't find Jesus articulated in a lot of these guys, and this is the difference. Like God is a really big word for a lot of people that believe a lot of things.
Right.
But when you start talking about the person of Jesus, you are then defining yourself as far as what it is you actually. This is where you get into Christianity, and there wasn't a lot of that there.
And I suspect that might be one of the reasons that that the country was founded with the principle of religious liberty, because of the mixed bag.
Yeah.
If it was definitively a group of Christians,
Yes.
that maybe that piece of our founding
Yes.
would have played out a little bit differently.
So you just nailed the primary distinction. Is a lot of people will say, oh, we're a Christian nation. We were built as a religiously free nation. That was the goal of the guys that were coming together. They were coming out of a church that was the Church of England, breaking away from that. It was freedom in religion was really what these guys came together under.
And maybe highly
It wasn't
influenced by
Christianity.
Christian values.
Yes,
That, that's an important point. That I think that there was the Judeo-Christian ethic,
no doubt,
was definitely part of the founding fathers'
Right.
ideal as far as what America should be like, and that carried through for a really long time.
for sure.
Even though I would say there was a lot of garbage going on as well. I mean, you had
Sure.
things like slavery happening among these same people, and a lot of
But it had some legs.
pretty terrible
Yeah,
things. But
yeah.
but these principles stayed in place for a long time until recently.
Yeah, Judeo-Christian values had a good run.
Yeah.
It's kind of over now.
And I think that's been part of the issue we've watched, is that we've assumed this was a Christian nation because these principles were intact.
Right.
And then at some point, there was, like the church didn't, we were the last ones to get the memo, but people kind of decided we're not going to do it that way anymore.
Sure.
And so that's what we've watched kind of happen over the last, decade, 20 years is these principles have kind of been pushed aside. So Christian principles aren't in the center of the country anymore. Now they're kind of pushed to the fringes. And that's why I think a lot of people are kicking back and trying to say, no, we need to get back to the good old days, back to the way the country was
We
founded.
need to make people act like Christians again.
Correct.
And all we're seeing is the reality that you can't be a Christian nation just because there's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 Christians involved in something.
Right.
It's kind of like Christian businesses, right? We look at Chick-fil-A and we're like, that's a Christian business, really? Like if you like pull all the employees together and all the people that are involved at various levels, like, are they all Christians? It's like there's no such thing. Like you can have an influence of Christianity somewhere, but there's no such thing as like an all-out Christian organization.
Well, and you
or
can even
nation.
you can have individuals who are Christians.
Yes.
Right.
But you
That's
can't have the whole, like, so our country, I think that's our job as
We're-
Christians,
yep.
is we're supposed to
Yep.
introduce Christ to individuals.
Yes.
Not
gonna get
not
there.
try to make
We're
the
gonna
whole thing.
End,
Okay.
Brent, we're going to end
right.
there,
All right.
not start there.
Yeah, you brought it up, man.
Okay.
All right.
So where does it come from? Not, a nationalistic, Christian nationalism type thing. I think we just answered that. I think a lot of it comes from what the narrative that we've either been taught or that we understand that we were founded as a Christian nation,
Well, I think there's, and there's I understand the draw as far as why we like it and why we want it to stay that way. It makes for a good society. When you implement biblical principles and Christian ethics into a society, it actually makes for a really good society.
Yes.
And I think everybody have appreciated that on some level.
Sure.
And now, obviously something has shifted, but I get the desire to want to go back to what it was.
Well, let's hit that for a minute. What are some?
I think maybe you talk about ruffling feathers. I think maybe even just what we just said maybe would ruffle some
No,
feathers.
we're already
Like, there's
busted.
people that would debate that and argue.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
So what are some of the benefits of just having everybody think alike, act alike, do things the same way? You just touched on a few of them. Like, what's the appeal?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I just mentioned it makes for a really nice society. I
Sure.
mean, that everybody follows the same rules, kind of plays with the same playbook, and especially when it's what I like.
Right.
It's pretty
That's the bigger
fantastic.
thing. Yeah, more than everybody thinking alike. I want everybody to think like me.
Yeah.
And do like me, right?
Right,
And agree with
exactly.
me.
Well, and I think for a long time there was pressure put on people because it did seem that these Judeo-Christian ethics were prevalent.
Right.
Everybody kind of had to play by those rules. If you didn't, you were ostracized, or you were kind of made to feel like you were kind of, persona non grata. And then at some point that changed, and now what you're seeing is people.
Indigata Davida?
Whoa.
No, that's different. Anyway, now basically people are free to do whatever they really want, and it's what they probably always wanted to do, but now they can, and that's what we're seeing happen right now.
Right.
When you take the restraints off, or when you kind of take away the pressure to be moral or
To conform.
to conform, you get to see what's really there.
Right,
And that's really what we're seeing. It's not that it wasn't there before.
Right.
If you look back throughout history, I mean, it's funny how I get fired up about people, even some of the stuff I see right now, or kind of the feminization of men, and I'm seeing pictures of these movie stars wearing girls' clothes, and it irritates me. And it's probably just, I'm just tipping my hand here, but then I start thinking, okay, let's go back to the 70s and think about Mick Jagger and David Bowie. Let's go to the 80s and start looking at Duran Duran. And I mean, this is not new. Depeche
Right.
Mode. This is not new. This has been going on forever.
And it probably goes back farther than the 70s, a long ways.
Well, that's my point. Is as long as you go back to when the country was founded, you're going to see a lot of garbage that was there.
Right.
Dude,
People just had pressure to
when they
conform.
started it, they were wearing wigs and skirts, bro.
Yeah, stinking high heel shoes and buckles on them.
And powdering their faces. Like, we want to talk about some bad stuff?
Yeah.
Just go right back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, we got a comment on our mics.
Is it good or bad?
Oh, it's good. Pod mics, nice! Exclamation
Like,
point.
do they actually sound nice?
I don't
is
know.
the question.
Yeah, Jake, you'll have to let us know how they
Like,
sound.
we know they
but,
look rad. They look,
we
look pro.
We look official. So anyway,
all right, so
sorry for the digression.
back to the subject at hand. What are the dangers? What are the problems, the potential problems with Christians putting their nationalism on the same level as their Christianity? What's the problem? What's the problem in the church with that?
It's the wrong mission. I read a tweet from, I can't remember who it was, but something that showed up in my feed this week, and I'll probably butcher it because I don't remember it verbatim, but something to the effect that it's not that we need to separate our faith and politics, like faith has a political component.
They bleed.
To it.
Yep.
That there's some bleed there, but where the church has gone off the rails is that it's the wrong mission.
Yes.
When we start to think about nationalism and getting America back to what it once was, that's not the mission of the church.
So the wrong mission with the wrong goal.
Right.
Like, you can get someone then to conform again behaviorally,
Right.
or politically or socially, right? But it doesn't change their greatest predicament.
Right, and so the dominoes that fall is that you get people thinking that they're Christian when they're not,
No doubt.
simply by adhering to a certain set of political beliefs or being in a certain political party or whatever. And so it's the wrong mission, and you send a false message to people.
Yeah. No doubt.
I would just say, and the wrong gospel.
Yeah.
Because
It
and
is.
I
The
know
wrong
that's
message.
what you're getting at, but it's the wrong gospel.
So
because,
so what's the answer? Is wrong.
Absolutely, because
Yes.
we're saying that we can fix these things with the right political leaders, with the right legislation, with the right policies and so forth, and this will moralize our country again to get it back to what we want it to be. And again, the goal of moralizing people is not. It's not the gospel. You can force people to be moral, and nobody gets saved at the end of the day.
Right.
People are still hellbound, even though they're acting moral.
Well, like you said earlier, it's good for you
Yes.
to see that happen.
Right.
To have other people conforming around you.
Yeah.
But it's not the solution for them. They're actually worse off than they were to start with. Because they're thinking something has fixed the problem when it hasn't.
Right.
Exactly.
So and actually this is where the message gets tangled, and becomes extremely bad. Like, it is an extremely dangerous thing to lead that way. So
Well, and you're probably going to go there, but what about the foreigner?
yeah.
When our goal as Christian nationalists has to do with America and our politics and our morals, what does that say to the foreigner that comes in, that comes into our midst?
For sure. And I think we've seen some of what it says to the foreigner.
Well, that's
recently.
another big problem with it is the separatist mindset that exists in nationalism. Is that you have this idea that we're right, they're wrong, be like us or leave the country. And, and this is very, very prevalent. There's not room for a different view or a different way of thinking, or even a different race sometimes. Or it kind of goes against what the Christian message is.
It completely goes against it. So separatism's one of top of the list that I wrote down. I wrote like a number of things as far as dangers and the effects of it. Separatism's one of them. We see it all the time. We see people now making big and drastic moves to places where people think like them, vote like them, act like them. And that may be neat if you're on earth to be a Republican or a Democrat. But if you're a Christian, that is anti-Christian. Like, it's the opposite. I had a conversation, I think I mentioned to you guys last week, with a young man I haven't seen in a long time, and it was good to sit down and catch up with him. And He's got a lot of exciting things going on, but I just started asking him, what's up? What have you been up to? What are you doing? And he was talking about living in Portland and about to looking into making a move to the promised land, Idaho. Sorry, that made someone mad too. I said, this is interesting. And I thought, I haven't seen this dude in a long time. I love this guy. I don't want to just outright rebuke him, but I did. I kind of lovingly kind of pushed back and said, look, if you and everyone like you leaves these places and goes to those places, who's going to preach the gospel to those people? And I just kind of reminded him, Christians don't run from fires. They run into them. That is our commission. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, you're right. I've been thinking about that. and so people know this, and they actually do kind of need to be rebuked. It needs to be something that is loud and clear. Christians, stop thinking this way. It's not Christian.
Well, again, if your goal of Christianity is your happiness, which I think, unfortunately,
or your kids' happiness, which we get caught up in.
Yep. Yes. And I get that, but that's, I think, what we bought into, this idea that the prosperity gospel has snuck into the church in a way that we don't always identify, but this is part of that thing, that idea of
absolutely
happiness is my main goal, and in order to be happy, I need to get away from the baddies and go hang out with the goodies.
Yep.
And then, my life will be good again.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Idaho, I've lived there not most of my life anymore, but a long time. It's full of people that sin differently than people in downtown Portland.
For sure.
But it's full of sinners.
But it doesn't matter, and you don't have to witness to them because they act like you do and think like you do.
Right. No, they're still conforming to the general. I mean, not all of them, but they still conform to the kind of what we like, as far as the Judeo-Christian principles.
Yeah.
But you don't see a lot of Christian belief there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I actually know a pastor who moved out to the Midwest a while back because it was too hard to pastor in the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. And so, moved out to, I forget where, but somewhere in the Midwest for that very reason, because it's, people think, like them more in this other area, and ran away from the fire rather than into it.
Yeah, exactly.
The funny thing is that sometimes it's harder to lead a moral person to Christ than it is somebody who's completely immoral.
Right.
We have people around us that maybe we don't know how to relate to, but their need is obvious, and maybe our work is cut out for us if we go to these places where moralism is kind of the reigns.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, if there's a reasonable resemblance between you and them, there's not an obvious need for change or for something different. Look at us, we're the same.
Well, and I would even say that's been the problem in our country for a long time, is that we see it as a Christian nation,
right?
But there's not a lot of Christians. So how does that happen? Well, what do we do with that?
Exactly, which means it's not a Christian nation. And this is my point with even the founding fathers, the group of the collective that came together. You know what I mean? Some of them were, but not all of them. Some of them had some vastly different ideas that weren't Christian. And so we didn't start as a Christian. We started as a religiously free, open nation, which is what we accomplished, right? And we're actually seeing more of that now, which is part of what is a challenge for the Christians, is to see people actually come out and believe what they believe and worship what they worship the way they want to worship it. And we're looking at it going, you can't do that. And it's this is exactly what America has allowed these people to come and do.
Yep.
Right. So it's actually ironic. It's weird. The fruits, I think, is the worst thing for me that I see come out of these Christians that are more American nationalists. They're divisive. It's an us versus them type of mindset. There's anger, there's division, there's fear. There's all these fruits that start coming out. That's common in these people. It's a pattern I see that are the opposite of the fruits of the Spirit,
right? Which
should tell you something right there, right?
Well, there's also a real hypocrisy,
major,
because in order to kind of toe the line of Christian nationalism, you have to compromise on the leaders that you promote. We've seen that even with I'm not going to name names, I guess, because it'll really make people mad.
You're not going to name names.
But when you have somebody that is putting the policies in place that you like, you have to basically give that person a pass on their morality, even when it's clearly a mess, because they're implementing what you want, what you think needs to happen. So I've seen a lot of Christians that have lost credibility because they've championed certain leaders and championed certain causes when, I don't know. We end up with a little egg on our face in that regard.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and it seems like this kind of mix of faith and politics. I think as Christians we're called to bring our faith into kind of every arena of life. But in this kind of Christian nationalism, it seems like politics wins out and faith becomes subservient to politics.
Yes.
Right. And when we get that order wrong, I mean, it's the same thing that Paul talks about in Romans 1 of, worshiping the creation over and above the creator.
Yep.
Just all the dominoes fall in the wrong way
Yeah.
when we get that wrong.
So jumping right off of that, piggybacking on that, like that's another thing I see is that the source, like the primary source of the Christian nationalists, becomes more than the Bible.
Right.
So there's other sources that become prioritized, whether it's a news outlet or whether it's a podcast of a certain kind of people. InfoWars is one of those right now. I got something sent to me the other day by somebody, I won't say who, and it was an InfoWars thing that talked about Reformation, and it was like this biblical language, but they have their own prophets, these guys that are Christians that come on there and all of it has to do with the here and now. This president's the problem, this vice president's the problem, this is the problem, and they're talking about the church waking up and coming out and doing something about these people, right? And so again, the source takes you to an emphasis that the Bible wouldn't take you to.
Right.
And that seems to be a commonality as well with Christian nationalists. And part of why I think they're so mixed up and they get things so wrong is because they're not just grounding everything here; they're grounding it in other places,
right?
Too. And
well, even their citizenship, they're grounding that in the wrong place as well, because it all has to do with this being the promised land, this being the place to fight
Kingdom
for.
now.
Yes, and again, if you have that mindset, it's funny because there's even some end times views that if you belong to certain camps, it kind of makes sense that you would be that way.
Yeah.
So people that are post-mill, Reconstructionists, or even like the Bethel group that have that dominion theology idea, we have to basically Christianize the nation in order for Christ to come back.
Yes.
And once that happens, then he comes back. There is that end times mindset.
No
and
doubt.
so I get why people are doing that in those camps.
Sure.
But it's funny how many people in our context are pre-trib. We don't necessarily subscribe to the pre-trib
There's a lot
rapture.
of people we know that are dispensational.
Dispensational
that are
who believe that it's going to get worse as the end gets
Yes.
Closer, as and yet they're still trying to I don't know, it's just kind
trying
of
to
weird.
make America rad.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like, don't you want Jesus to come back, because it's going to get worse before he comes back, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
doesn't this play right into what we want? But anyway, it's weird. At the end of the day, we know God's on his throne and our citizenship is in heaven. So
Yeah.
we're passing through.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't put roots down here like we see some people do.
Right.
So
This
we
isn't the
so we
promised land.
listed a bunch of dangers here, and I mean we can probably keep going. Like there's problems with it, which is the whole reason we're talking about it, and we've seen it firsthand. We've dealt with it with congregants, and like it's something that's prominent, right? But I want to go back to what I think the biggest one is, and that's mission. You guys hit that. The biggest one is it affects our ability to properly do mission the way that
Right.
Christ has left us here to do mission. And so I was thinking of like 2 Corinthians 6. Paul talks about how they put no obstacle like in their ministry of the gospel before any man, right? And there was a time in this country where you could walk into probably any church building and you would see an American flag somewhere, probably in the sanctuary, probably up front on the stage. Some people still do it. Some people still wish we would do it. I've had the request recently, like, why don't you have this? And it's because it's become an obstacle. We no longer live in a nation, whether you're Republican or Democrat, where everyone's bought in with a healthy patriotism. Like there are divides that are wide and deep, and the Christian needs to consider the state in which each person is walking into their doors in. We're not there to promote patriotism or to restore that in somebody. We're there to go ahead.
Well, sadly, I don't know how it's happened, but somehow the American flag seems to be co-opted by one party now. Like if you see somebody flying a flag,
Yeah, you're Republican.
you're Republican, and I don't understand how that happened or why it happened.
No, but that's exactly my
It's
point.
the symbol of the nation.
It's an obstacle.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Yep.
I don't know. It drives me crazy,
Yeah.
honestly. And I felt, we generally put our flag out for the 4th of July and things at our house, and now I feel like am I just labeling myself
Right,
in a
put a
way that
target
is
on
going to
yourself.
put an obstacle in front of my neighbors
Yeah.
for them coming to Christ because he's one of those guys.
Yep.
And again, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
But-
No, I have you guys have been to my house. I have a lot of Americana, and I just love American stuff. And so I have bunting out front that hangs below the windows of the American flag. Used to have one flying over at the RV shed, and if you go in the house, I've got, pictures of, anyway, You don't have to question my patriotism if you come to my house ever. But I remember the neighbors next door when they first moved in, they'd have to drive by our house, to go in and out every single day. And it wasn't long when this sign, nobody else goes past their house. There's like no one there. The only one that sees their front yard is us, who lives next door to them. And there was that popular Black Lives Matter, like it was kind of this statement of faith or non-faith or whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean, that like faced our house for us. And I kind of always thought like that was because I have flags flying.
It could have been you have the cardboard cutout of Ronald Reagan as well.
It could be because Ronald Reagan is waving hi to everybody that goes by.
Not really. That would be awesome.
Back to what we were talking about. Let me read this from Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. You guys know this one well. For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being under the law myself, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. What's Paul saying here?
He's saying no obstacles. I mean, how do you take the message of America is rad across the ocean?
Agreed.
Like, what do you do with that?
Or people coming in,
right?
Yeah.
Or people coming in. Mm-hmm. Paul is basically saying like the gospel takes precedence and priority over every other message,
for sure,
and it's the most important thing that people need to know. It's the most important thing that we as Christians have been given the message to deliver. It's the mission of the church, and it takes precedence over everything else.
There you go. So you mentioned like people across the ocean, or even people that are coming in. But I think what we need to understand as missiologists in the church today is that our nation's different. We have younger generations now who did not grow up appreciating America, but grew up hearing a demonization of America, and a lot of it's valid, you know what I mean. But there's people that have a bad taste in their mouth that are Americans, and if we want to win them to Christ, we need to consider that when we interact with these
Absolutely.
people. Yeah.
No, I think you have this idea that if you don't vote like me, you really don't deserve to even come to Christ.
Right.
And that's nobody would say that, but that's what we act like sometimes. And so if we identify our church in such a way that outsider or that person isn't welcome here, what are we doing exactly? And again, if we believe our theology, what's going to change their heart and mind to win them over to more the Judeo-Christian way of thinking is the gospel.
Right.
So we want to make sure they hear that.
Right. Exactly.
That'll change their views on a lot of these the hot button issues that we get so fired up about, like abortion. That's going to fix it, not legislation.
Exactly.
So
yeah. We talk about this all the time. The Bible talks about it all the time. We need a heart change. Our behaviors aren't the problem. What's going on inside of us, which prompts our behaviors, is the problem. And once that's taken care of, it changes what comes out. It changes what we think. It changes what we do. It changes how we view and look at.
But I think when people
everything.
realize and open up to the idea that, I think we project the way of thinking and our own beliefs on everybody else that comes in the door. I realized a long time ago, even just through walking through the parking lot, looking at bumper stickers on cars, about half the people that come to the door probably don't.
Wait. This location.
Well, I mean, I've just noticed it over the years. Yeah, true.
Let's be fair.
Fair enough.
No,
but they might vote different than you. Whereas some churches that we've been in the part of in the past, it was clear everybody was kind of a card-carrying Republican, NRA member, whatever it was. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Come on,
but now what you've got is we've got a mixed bag of people coming through the door.
Yep.
And so we need to make sure we're not putting an obstacle between them and the gospel for them to meet Christ.
Exactly.
Right. I often wonder if Christians spent as much energy displaying and declaring the gospel as they do promoting nationalism.
There you go.
Like how would things be different? I
Yep.
mean, it just seems like there's a lot of energy and effort that's going into
Totally agree.
Promoting the wrong things.
There's a misplaced emphasis.
Yeah.
Like with their money, with their time, with their words, with everything.
Yeah.
It's
Actually, I thought about it. If you're more concerned about gun rights and immigration policies than you are about loving your neighbor and winning them to Christ.
Yep.
Something's gone completely
Right.
wrong.
No doubt.
And it makes me, it's just sad to think about. But I would say that so many Christians would say, no, I'm way, they would identify as an American first and a Christian second almost. They wouldn't say it, but the way they act, that's what it seems like.
I heard a brother say that to me not too long ago in one of our congregations where we were talking, and he said they can come for anything they want to, because I'm a Christian or whatever. They can come kill me for any of that, but when they come for my guns, like, I'm going to open them up.
Yeah.
like the guns were the most valuable thing to this person, and it was so disgusting.
I think in fairness, we all believe in gun rights, and we all believe in immigration done the right way. Sure. I'm not saying that we're liberal in that regard, but it's just funny the emphasis people place on some of these things over and above the Christian mission of the great, winning people to Christ.
Yeah. Well, in the reality, I think it was a couple weeks back when we were talking about boycotts, we were looking at 1 Corinthians 8 and 9 and this issue of eating meat sacrificed to idols, and Paul basically talks about it like it's the stronger brother that is able to do this thing with conscience, but for the sake of your brother.
That's right.
Like there's this undertone in that passage of I as a Christian should be willing to lay down my rights for the sake of others.
The Christian is willing to relinquish rights. Yeah. Because he's stronger.
For the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what makes him the stronger brother.
Right.
Is that he's gospel minded. He's thinking about the gospel and others.
And so, maybe we have, rights to carry guns, for example, but maybe if I lay down that right for the sake of my brother, maybe that's the better thing to do, as opposed to fighting to maintain, this right.
Well, even understanding that these rights are not biblical rights. These aren't God-given rights. They're American rights.
Right.
American rights are great while we have them. I'm all for them. But, list out what your rights are as a Christian. I mean, I imagine like Paul in the early church we're sitting never going, you'll never take our, these are our rights.
Well,
the
Beatitudes are the Christian, whatever's the Constitution for the Christian, right? Like you have the right to be reviled and hated and
suffer.
The right to be poor in
But
spirit.
you're right. I've heard so many Christians that again use synonymously without thinking about it the constitutional rights as an American on the same level, like God wrote those and they were pulled out of Scripture somewhere.
Yep.
And I don't think they were.
Did you see a while back, I think it was Zondervan, we're going to publish a Christian or a Bible with the Constitution in it.
I'm sure.
And they just got so much blowback that they ended up pulling it. But,
dude, I doubt that it doesn't already exist.
That same kind of thinking, though, that the Constitution is on par with the Word of
Well, and that's
God.
why nationalism, Christian nationalism, exists so strongly, is because there are people that firmly believe that our God-given rights and our American rights are the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as Christians,
I'm thankful for both, but they're not the same thing.
we've been saying, take up your cross and die to yourself and follow me. That's your right. Those are your rights.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to loop back to kind of where we started, but I think this was mentioned earlier by you guys, but it's helpful to remember the Christian must distinguish Americans from America. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
It is
I
good
like
for
that.
the Christian to distinguish Americans from America. I think it was you that said it earlier. It's the people, it's the individuals that the Christian should be on fire and concerned with, not the nation that you happen to be born into. Those are two different things. I think that we clearly see this in our Bibles in different areas as far as what the church is. We talked about this as well. Peter, gives it a little attention in 1 Peter chapter 2. You are a chosen race. He's talking to the church, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. I think it's really interesting that he uses a holy nation. We are part of a nation, but it doesn't start with an A. You know what I mean? Our thinking needs to be different as far as the nation that we actually right now belong to on earth.
Right. And he doesn't say there to proclaim the excellencies of that nation.
Right.
But the excellencies of him who called us out of darkness and into light.
That's just it. So we belong to a nation that transcends any nation that's here. For what purpose? For the individual of nations.
Well, and
for the people.
I like what he says after. He goes on to say, once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles So he actually identifies the Christian
Yeah.
as somebody who's just passing through.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, you are part of a nation. You are
Right.
part of a family, but it's not here on earth.
We're not digging in.
Yep.
We're not flying colors on our shirts and our hats and whatnot that represent properly
Yep.
the kingdom that we actually belong to.
Well, and
Right.
isn't heaven going to look a whole lot different than we probably think it's going to look
Yeah.
like? It's
Yeah.
not going to be.
There's no stars and bars in heaven. It won't be
Stars
there.
and bars?
Stars and bars, yeah. I heard that somewhere.
Is that a
I don't know
country
where
song?
that-
I don't know.
Stars
Might
and
be.
bars, homie. I had to think about the bars for a second. I was thinking like drinking.
Yeah,
like oh, is this
Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you now. No, it took me a minute, but I got there. Paul does a number here in Galatians 2, pretty powerful stuff to consider. Chapter 3, verse 25 down. Now that faith has come, we're no longer under a guardian. He was talking about the law being the guardian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God through faith. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Therefore, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, no male or female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. And it's just that idea that our ethnicity or our nationalism, there is no Jew or Greek, okay?
Right.
And these were people that, if there was ever a God nation, it was probably Israel. And he's saying, no, like, don't regard yourself that way anymore. Like, the boundaries are gone because of what Christ has done. So,
But just like Israel, they had a hard time with the outsider.
They had a hard
if you're going to
time.
come in to our country, to our nation, you need to become like us.
Yeah.
I think America has that same mindset, or
We do.
Christian
Absolutely.
Americans have that same mindset. Again, we all do want to conform to the image of Christ. We want to see that happen, but the tools we've been given are the gospel message.
Yep.
That's what's going to change people, not
absolutely.
the rest of it. So
So again, the bottom line is like I think the Christian needs to have a mindset of winning people and being about people rather than being about a nation. And,
Well, and
that will
I
clear
love
up a lot of things.
Revelation 5:9 is worth reading. It says, they sang a new song saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you have ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation."
I'll bet
That's
some
what-
of them were even Democrats.
Well, that's yeah.
Just a few.
yeah, maybe.
I mean,
Maybe not.
it's all the people that Christian nationalists would put into the camp of
Yes.
enemy and traitor.
Yes.
Right.
And yet heaven's going to look a whole lot different than what we might think it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very good.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
I hope you will,
Yeah.
because I'm done.
Oh,
and,
no,
and we
okay.
still have like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got a little bit. So how do you balance patriotism and faith?
Oh, gosh, that was one of my questions. Can we be patriotic without being Christian nationalists?
Yeah. What does that look like?
So like I believe I am. Like I said earlier, like if you come to my house, you will see that I have a great appreciation for the country I live in. Like I tell people all the time, like I feel like I won the lottery. Like when God put me on earth to put me in this country, I appreciate that and I thank Him for it. Like I don't take it lightly. I think this is an awesome place on the globe that we get to live and raise kids and do life. So I am a patriot. I come from a long line of military, and I appreciate every single one of them for what they did. People that serve for their country, give for their country. Like I'm right there with this stuff. Like I'm a full-on American, and I love America. The difference is what we just talked about. Because I'm a Christian first, like ahead and above and beyond my patriotism, I'm going to put on my Christian hat every time I go out. I'm going to put on my Christian hat every time I interact with somebody. I'm going to put on my Christian hat every time I'm looking to form a relationship or I go somewhere that may be populated with people that I know aren't going to think like me. Like I'm not going to try to push their button by putting on something patriotic. Right. I'm gonna blend, and I'm gonna try to find opportunities to get in there. And so I think it's the all things to all men. I have definite preferences and appreciations that I don't need to advertise to everybody. Why? Because Christ is more important to get to them than my likes and my opinions. Right. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say same exact thing you just said. I love this country. I love that I'm an American. I love that I got to be born here and raised here. But I would also just warn, don't do that thing where we romanticize all this wonderful stuff about, the way this country, there's been some great things, great rights, great things, but there's been a lot of bad things as well. And this idea that we need to get back to the good old days, there was a lot of garbage back in the good old days, a lot. And so the answer is not to go backwards. The answer is Christ. And that's what's going to change people. And that's again, be grateful we live here, be grateful for the rights we have, but use them to advance the kingdom of Christ through the message of the gospel. That's what we're here for. The idea of fixing the things by going back, it's just not a thing.
No. Yeah, I mean, we've always been broken as a country. We've always been corrupt as a country. We're in a period now where like those things seem to be more obvious maybe than they have been in the past, but they have always been there. Things would happen behind closed doors that now happen out in the open, right? And so it's easier for us to see the flaws and to see the brokenness.
Well, and it's possible that God is actually, that maybe there is judgment coming on this nation for some of the things we're doing. We deserve that. But ultimately, it doesn't mean that because America fails, if it doesn't mean God's not fully on his throne doing, accomplishing his purpose. And even what's been going on in our country right now, as discouraging as it is as a patriot, it's actually been kind of helpful as a Christian and as a pastor because we're seeing the tree got kind of, shaken to the point
where
there's
a sifting.
Yeah, you're starting to see the difference between people that have just been Christian in name only, and now people that are desperate for Christ, and that's a helpful thing to see.
Yeah.
So
I think something too that maybe we haven't hit on is that if we believe that God truly is sovereign and that God is sitting on his throne, then everything, according to our Bibles, is working towards God's end, right? Mm-hmm. Everything. Yeah. And so as Christians, we can trust in that, and we don't necessarily have to freak out about the things that are going on, politically or at leadership levels in our country. We can mourn the things that are going on. We can mourn the brokenness. We can mourn the flaws. We can point them out. We can speak truth to them. But we can sleep at night because we know that everything is moving in the direction that God has ordained it to move. To the day that's going to come when all the wrong things will be made right and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Right. We can still sleep at night and still love the people.
Right.
That maybe are creating some of the woes.
Sure.
Right. The direction that we don't care for.
Right.
That everything's going. But I would also say we need to just be honest with ourselves as far as our idolatry. Like our idolatry knows no bounds. like we can worship anything and make anything an idol. And our country is one of those things that we can definitely
who was it that said that we're idol factories?
I think it was Calvin. It wasn't Luther. It was Calvin. That our hearts are an idol factory. Like it's just constantly manufacturing idols. And churning them out, and it's real easy because our country's a pretty awesome one that we get to live in. It's easy to instead of worship the gift giver, elevate the gift to a point that it's not meant to be, and get wrapped up in that, get caught up in that, and think it's right when it's completely wrong. So
well, I would also just say that there's this idea of this superiority that goes along with the Christian nationalist idea that we are a cut above, we're the right ones, we're the good ones, all this kind of idea, and they're the evil scum. And I think of the verses that say, "But such were some of you."
Right.
Apart from the grace of God in our lives and the saving power of Jesus, we're the scum of the earth.
Right.
And the only difference, the only thing that makes us not that is Christ, period.
Yep.
And so there is no place for a superiority, this, whatever this is that's going on that I see it's kind of an ugly thing that you see in that.
It is.
And there's no basis for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of self-righteousness.
So humble yourselves and share the words of truth with people that are still in the spot that we would be in apart from the grace of Christ.
If you're angry at people's sin more than you're heartbroken over it, then you've missed the gospel for yourself.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Good stuff. Anything else, guys?
Yeah.
Are
we in enough trouble?
I guess we'll find out as the emails start to pour in this week.
I would just say if there are people that are this is frustrating to conversation, or maybe they're challenged by it, or they want to talk to us more about it, we're totally open to that. We realize
Anytime.
that churches right now are growing by preaching the opposite of what we just did.
Exactly.
And we understand that we've lost some people to that, and we understand why.
Yep.
But we're not going to compromise on something that's this important.
Yeah.
Because this is the gospel really is at stake here,
It is at stake.
and it's important. So
Yep.
So this is what you're seeing here today in this conversation. Like, hopefully those of you that have been around a little while at the door know this. Like, we talk about these things because we love you, and we're saying what we're saying because we really love you.
Fully.
And we really love Jesus. We really love the gospel. We really love the Word of God. And there's stuff that gets sideways, and that's part of our job. I mean, even if we're going to be hated for it,
Right.
Initially, is to sound an alarm once in a while and say, hey, we need to check ourselves on this, like, because it's not in line with how He would have us live. And so, we love you guys. We care about you. Consider it. Consider what we're talking about here prayerfully. And like Brent said, come and talk to us if you want to. So.
yeah, amen.
Cool. Let me pray. Lord God, we do thank you for giving us what we need out of the scriptures, even for subjects like this, that you've spoken, and you've spoken pretty clearly on these things about how the church should be, what kind of mind we should have, how we should conduct ourselves while we're on earth. God, I pray that we would. I pray that whatever you're doing right now across this land in the church, that you would keep doing it, that there would be a continual sifting and shifting, a purifying of your church to the gospel over and above anything else that exists. And so anyone that's struggling with this, God, I pray that you would just comfort them with truth and with love in this. And we thank you for this day. We thank you for all that you are, all that you've done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us.
I just heard someone coming out the stairs.